Hi everyone, my name is Jackson Beckner, and the article I took ownership for was Pleasurably regarding the pain of fictional others by Smuts. In this article, Smuts concerns himself with the question, is it ever bad to delight in undeserved fictional suffering, and argues for the conclusion that yes, in fact it is. He does this by illustrating that it is intrinsically bad to delight in the suffering of fictional others, and that the fictionality of this suffering makes no pertinent difference. The paper's main argument can be presented as follows. Fantasies of undeserved suffering can be bad, thus enjoying these fantasies can be bad. Fantasies in fictional works function in the same or similar enough ways, thus enjoying fictional suffering can be bad. The structure of the paper and this presentation start with the introduction and presentation of the main argument, the fictionality problem, which presents two main objections, a section called Enjoying the Bad, which presents some thought experiments, responses to the previous objections, accounting for fictional differences, and the conclusion. The first objection is the autonomous fantasy objection. Autonomous fantasies are those that we do not desire to be actualized, and we experience them from an outside or third-person perspective. We experience fictions as autonomous fantasies. Autonomous fantasies are thought to be morally unproblematic. The argument of this objection can be presented as follows. Autonomous fantasies are experienced from an outside perspective. Autonomous fantasies are morally unproblematic. We interact with fictions from an outside perspective. If 1 and 3, then fictions are autonomous fantasies. If 2 and 4, then fictions are morally unproblematic. Thus, fictions are morally unproblematic. The second objection is a harmless objection, because no one, the fictional parties or the enjoyer, is harmed in the enjoyment of fictional suffering, then there is no harm done. Thus, there should be no moral objection. It's similar to the old adage of no harm, no foul. The argument for this objection can be presented as follows. There's no reason to believe others are harmed in the enjoyment of fictional suffering. There's no reason to believe the enjoyer is harmed in the enjoyment of fictional suffering. If 1 and 2, then we can assume enjoying fictional suffering is harmless. If something is harmless, then it is morally innocuous. If 3 and 4, then enjoying fictional suffering is morally innocuous. Thus, enjoying fictional suffering is morally innocuous. Smuts presents multiple thought experiments, but he only really refers back to 2. In the cruel world thought experiment, we consider a world that is inhabited by beings that only think cruel thoughts. The existence of this world is worse than none at all, thus, cruel thoughts are intrinsically bad. In the twin worlds, there are 2 identical worlds that have only a single inhabitant. In world A, that inhabitant has precious thoughts of kittens, and in world B, that inhabitant fantasizes of torturing children. World A is preferred because the thoughts of world B are intrinsically bad, and this shows that enjoying merely imagined evil is bad. The previous thought experiments are meant to show that enjoying evil, and thus the suffering of others, is intrinsically bad, and this should apply to the suffering of fictional others. Smuts' reply to the autonomous fantasy objection is that if enjoying cruel thoughts is bad, it is bad regardless of the existence of a victim. The previous thought experiment shows that enjoying cruel thoughts is bad, thus enjoying cruel thoughts is bad regardless of the existence of a victim. Smuts does not directly argue against the harmless objection, but comes for its foundation. Here is that welfarism, which the argument relies on, is itself confrontational, and thus we cannot fully consider the argument until that confrontation. Here's the argument presented against this objection. The main idea is that it is not necessarily that the enjoyment causes harm in order to be considered bad. There are other means with which we could consider something bad that aren't based on welfare. Now that the 2 most powerful objections to Smuts' conclusion are dealt with, he believes that it is fairly obvious that this conclusion is true. If enjoying any suffering is bad, then enjoying fictional suffering must be bad as well. In the next section, he attempts to reconcile the intuitive difference between real and fictional suffering. He claims that fictions themselves can direct our emotional attention, and that fiction complicates our emotional responses through the manner of representation. Fiction's powers also often mitigate the badness of our emotional responses as well. In considering objections and responding to them, Smuts believes that he's come to the conclusion that it is bad to enjoy pain of fictional others because the enjoyment of suffering is intrinsically bad. The fictionality of said suffering plays no mitigating role in this badness. Smuts fleshes out this argument by noting that there are differences between real-world and fictional suffering, but these differences don't nullify fictional suffering's intrinsic badness. I had a lot of fun with this article, and I'm looking forward to seeing where everyone else in the class will take it. Thanks, and good luck.